Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Hubler, and I'm the moderator for the discussion this afternoon, our webinar on succession planning in the midst of the coronavirus. And I want to acknowledge the sponsors, Fredrikson and Byron, and the Platinum Group. I also want to acknowledge and my co-host, Bob Stewart, from the Platinum Group, who's also here to respond to questions when we get into the question and answer part of the program. The format for today's program will be for us to hear from Joe King, who is the owner and CEO of King Technology, and his president, Randy Roseth, about their experiences of succession planning in the midst of the coronavirus. And after we've heard from them, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers, and you can either use that and or the chat function on your screen. So to start with, I'd like to start with Joe and have you tell us a little bit about King Technology and what you do and what you're up to and the work that your company does.
Well, thank you, Tom. Sure pleasure to be here with all of you, and sure hope that there's some valuable information that we can share with you. King Technology has been in business for the last 42 years. My father and I started the business, and that was in 1978. We currently focus on the swimming pool and hot tub industry, and we are a family-owned business with our core values being the family values. Our innovative products that we sell are unique chemistries and unique delivery systems. We have a very wide breadth of intellectual property. And our objective is to sell these products to the consumer to eliminate the pain points of ownership with either a swimming pool or a hot tub, and we do that in the very best way we possibly can. And our primary, we have multiple brands, but our flagship brand is the Frog brand, and we sell that in the US, Canada, and Europe.
Next, I'd like to hear a little bit from both of you about your working relationship and how that's going, because one of the unique things about the transition and the program that you've developed for the next generation is your working relationship, which I think, based on my experience, is really unique. So I'd appreciate hearing a little from both of you about how that works and what it's like and how you evolved into it.
Well, I'll tell you my version, and then you can hear Randy's. So it started 14 years ago when I met Randy. I had gone through 3 sessions with our hiring team, and we had 6 people in each one of those groups, and I just was not satisfied. As I was looking for a very unique person that could steer the company for the next 20 plus years. But also be the bridge. I always talk about Randy being the bridge to the future, because at the time that I hired Randy, which I think only took us about 32 hours of interviewing.
Wow.
That's where you have to check with Randy.
Sure.
And the interesting thing was, at the end of 32 hours, I don't think I ever asked to see his resume. I only wanted to know about him as a person, what his values were, what was important to him, and how he would communicate that, because I was really looking for the baton to pass off from myself to Randy. The people that I had personally selected, the directors, I wanted them to have the closest possible thing to myself, and that was of consistency. And that consistency was important for me, not only for the directors and the staff, but also our vendors, our customers, and our end users. And I have to tell you that if you search long enough, hard enough, you can find a diamond in the rough. And Randy was one out of 18 top executives that I interviewed from the Twin Cities, and there is no finer man to have given the keys to running this business. He's doing an outstanding job.
So Randy, from your perspective, what's it been like, and what's made the relationship between you and Joe so dynamic and powerful and successful, not only in terms of the company, but we'll be talking about in a few minutes about creating a succession plan with the other family members?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me here today. I think one of the most important things that any relationship can have is communication and trust. And from day one, that was just something that Joe and I had in alignment. And I could tell within, even though it took 31 hours of interviewing, it was about 10 minutes into the interview and I knew that, I wanted to come here. And ever since then, and again, it's been 14 years, the word consistency, trust, transparency, and communication, those words we see it every day. We work together very well. Our value systems are in alignment, and our flow of communication is very frank and transparent. One of the first things we talked about during those 31 hours was the succession planning that the succession plan that he was developing for his son. So even during the original interviewing process, I knew about this, and I appreciated that. And so I had the choice if I wanted to be a part of that or not, and I chose to, and I'm very happy that I did.
So at the time you came into the company, the sons were not working there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Well, tell me. Good, Joe.
Well, just to add, Alex was 20 years old, and Carson was 16.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about then the succession plan, the current plan that you have, and given the fact that you now have two sons who are working in the business, and a little bit about the history and how that's evolved, and what you're doing in terms of your plan.
Well, I can.
Why don't you kick it off, Randy?
Okay, I'll walk through maybe some of the more tactical things that we're doing. So as we just noted, from the start, the plan was for me to be the bridge between the two generations. And the plan included having both sons, after they get out of college, to seek outside employment, and then within their respective careers, see one or two meaningful advancements in their position. So to get some third-party training, hopefully with a larger organization, and that did come to fruition. Another important element of it was we didn't want to bring them into the business until there was a bona fide position that matched their skill sets. The first one opened up for Alex, who's the older son, and that was in our sales department, where he's now a regional sales manager. And then about 9 months ago, the second opportunity opened up for Carson, who's the younger son, in our operations department as our strategic sourcing manager. That was a role that he had at General Mills before he moved to Medtronic. So once we identified the organization had a bona fide need, that their skill sets fit, that was the timing for when we brought them in. Then once we brought them into the organization, we wanted to make sure they got appropriate training in, of course, the company and how we operate, but also our supply base and our channels of distribution, our representatives, the consumers. And that's what we're doing right now. And our next step is we're looking for opportunities to provide them with cross-functional experiences in the business. Alex, who's been here for 3 years now, we're starting to look at what the next move for him will be, because being in a sales role, you're developing these relationships. You can't just pick them up and move them around for these short stints. You want to leave them in certain places so they get enough appropriate experience. And he's getting to the point now where we can start looking at moving him into other organizations. We're also closely evaluating what gaps they have in their skill sets. A good example of that for both of them right now would be the amount of supervisory experience. Neither sons have had that in their past roles, so in their next moves here, we want to make sure that we can provide them with some of that hands-on managerial work. In addition to that, we want to make sure that each son has exposure to both the operational side of the business and the sales and marketing side. So we're going to try to develop, and we want to develop a strong core competency for each in both of those areas. So we'll be looking to move Carson into a sales and marketing role, probably as a product manager, which he has some prior experience in. And we'll look for an operational role to move Alex into. So they get a nice blend between both of them, of both the front side and the back side of the business.
Maybe one thing I would...
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead.
Well, Tom, one thing I would just add is that in addition to this plan that we're putting together, one of our, I should say, our primary board member that's CFO of a consumer products company has come from and is currently in a family business where they've done exactly what we're trying to do. So we're leaning on Mike as our CFO and experience that he can bring to it, and it's been very successful for them as well. But he's been a sounding board. He's helping Randy put together the outline of the next steps. And even though it's not exact yet, as we move forward, we'll be affirming those plans, and Mike will be an important part of that.
So, Joe, tell me, what has it been like for you having your two sons work in the business, and how's that dynamic affected your father-son relationship and or your business relationship with them? What's that been like?
Oh, great question. It's really been invigorating. I'm probably more excited for this stage in my life. I'm probably more excited about the future than I might have been without that added interest, because I can see they really get it now. They're in the business. They've heard about it for a long time. I'm starting to see them rise up in their maturity, in their professionalism, in their leadership, and that's very rewarding. Not something that I really anticipated, so that's been a joy to me. In addition, I would say that it is challenging, but I would say that just to call out to you, Tom, you did a great job of preparing our family through the onboarding process. It was bumpy. We didn't know what we were getting into, but we did come to the conclusion that it was something we wanted to do together. And the spouses are all in, and they're even more all in today than they ever were before. It takes discipline in the relationship and the time that we spend together. So we do a really good job of trying not to talk business when we're together, just as a family or just a gathering, a meal, a swim, or whatever it happens to be. So thank you for your counsel. It's working well, and I don't feel that we're at risk. I don't. We're learning good habits.
You're welcome. So what's it like also for you to have Randy managing your sons? I mean, what's that been like? And how has that dynamic worked between the two of you in terms of him being the training person or the responsible person in terms of the succession plan?
You know what? It couldn't be going any better, and here's why. I actually, I'm a deliberative in my strengths finder, so I always look for more information, and I've got, as you know that, Tom, I've asked everybody I can even think of, and I've gotten more advice, And the thing that I learned before I ever entered into this was, I am not the guy that really should be teaching them the kinds of things that need to be taught. I'm going to teach them stewardship, not ownership, stewardship. And that's where I spend my time. And I think St. Thomas Family Business Center has been a terrific element to that as well, helping them adjust their thinking so they are actually thinking 1 and 2 generations out right now. And these are just 30-year-olds. I'm really impressed. But back to Randy, what I really asked him to do was allow me to teach you everything I can think of that will help shorten your learning curve and your growth pattern and help you learn from my successes, not my failures, my successes, so that we can replicate into the future. And now he's doing the same thing with them. And that I'm very grateful for, even to the point of, if one of them needs a little stick handling, a little coaching, not just the job responsibly, but something that needs to move from here to there. And we've already been through that. Randy's the guy to do it, and he did it well. And we just talked about it in recent days. Great results. Now, the problem with doing it as a father is you got all the baggage. The things we tried to do right, we failed, and we all have this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the relationship is actually allowing us to be stronger, better. One great example is, for the longest time during one of my son's early stages of business, our relationship was further and further apart. 1 minute ago, when I leaned forward, I had to turn off the phone. He's calling me. I get phone calls, I get text messages, I get emails. I get better communication as a father and as a professional together than I've ever had before. I highly recommend a bridge like Randy.
Randy, anything you want to add?
Well, we're fortunate in the regard that both Alex and Carson are, regardless if their last name was Johnson or Nelson, I would still want them in the business because they're high caliber individuals. There's a lot of talent there, and they're very good employees. So we're fortunate in that regard. And the second part of it is, this is because they have directors that manage them directly, and we manage them as king employees, not as kings, and that makes a big difference in how they're perceived in the organization. They're not perceived as owners; they're perceived as coworkers.
Terrific. I'd like to move on and ask you about the impact of the coronavirus. That was the initial sort of factor in thinking about this. But in addition to that, in addition to the pandemic, we've got the recent protests. And I'm curious about how all of that's affecting the company and how is it affecting the succession planning process?
Well, we're trying to use it as, there are learning opportunities throughout this. And it's interesting for us. Our business has continued to be strong throughout this crisis, which is a bit of a surprise. You think with everything you're hearing and seeing that it would have an adverse impact. But we've been planting a lot of seeds over the past few years, and we're not feeling it like the rest of, or much of the economy is. But be that as it may, there's still several crises going on that we have to manage. And in terms of our employee base, teleworking because of the stay-at-home orders, we put that plan together over a weekend because we didn't have a work-from-home policy. And over a weekend, we put that together and we remote worked everybody in the entire building. So the methodology that we use to do that, the communication plan we use to do that, There's a lot of nuances to it that we brought Alex and Carson in and gave them a front row seat so they could see what we were doing during these times of crisis and why we were doing it, and then they're seeing the results of it. They're going to run into different crises throughout their careers that they'll be able to look back at how we're managing this, and maybe there's a nugget in there that they'll be able to pick up and carry forward. But the big thing is when we see these non-traditional events occurring in the business, we're making sure that we're keeping them in the loop as to how we're addressing them and why we're addressing them. And in some cases, they're the ones who have to execute on the tactics.
Joe, anything you'd like to add?
I think it was an opportunity, and Randy, tapped him on the shoulder and brought him in. This all, as we all experienced, was happening in real time. Major events were occurring each day, not just over a month, but each day. And he tapped him on the shoulder and brought him in and sat him down while we were making big time decisions. But the most important thing, I'll go back to that word consistency. One of our directors who's been with us almost 30 years, he said, what I love about working here is the consistency of the leadership. I can count on it. And that's what we were teaching them. Frankly, we didn't anticipate moving them to the front row. But on the other hand, in my executive group, they said, absolutely everybody should take advantage of a good crisis to learn and to teach. And that's what we did. So they weren't making the decisions, but they were sitting alongside of Randy, shoulder to shoulder, as we were calling the shots. So it was really quite terrific.
So I want to ask you, Joe, given the impact of this crisis on the company, how is it affecting your plans for both you and Mary? And I know you're very active grandparents and so forth, but what has this done for you? What kind of impact has this had on the two of you?
Well, it's actually quite interesting because I don't know if you could line this up quite like this, but so we typically, we winter in Florida. We came back March 21st, and that was a tough decision to make, but we did it. We quarantined for 2 weeks before we saw our kids. For 1 week thereafter, we found out that both of our sons' families were expecting at that time. And so we learned what they found out from their doctors, and that basically said, we can't see them. For 4 weeks before the baby, couldn't go to the hospital. 4 to 6 weeks after, we can then hold the in both cases, grandsons. And then, so one was having a birth in April, and the next one was in May. So the whole thing started over again. And I was telling the director team today, I haven't been with my entire family since Christmas.
Wow.
I still haven't. And to be honest, I didn't know what impact that was having. And for anybody that's on the line that has a family business, it's important to have family, as you're doing a family business, you need to be strong together. And when you can't be together, you're apart, it gets hard. And I didn't even know what was happening. It was an emotional thing that really got to me in the last few days, frankly. But I have now held both of our grandsons, but I haven't been in the same room with both of them yet.
Mm. So how are you and Mary managing all that stress?
Yesterday, she said, I think you need some guy time. And so that means call your best friend, do something, vent, and it usually means some physical activity, which is a bike ride, and then we ended up going out on the boat. We were together for about 6 hours, and Tom, you asked, the other element that we have to add to this is all the protesting and rioting and the like, not just locally but worldwide. And so that was really, really getting to me as well. Again, I didn't know it, but it was really inside. And I needed to talk it through with a good Christian buddy, and we did. And then I was able to express myself in an email that I sent all the employees today about what can we do, and we can stay the course. You know, our core values are basically all godly values. We can be the light, and we can collectively be together. We can be strong, and we can represent servant leadership, honesty, integrity. We can be immersed in courage. We can offer excellence. The golden rule.
Okay.
Those are our values. So we just forge forward together. And so that was an opportunity for us to share today as a company.
Thank you. Randy, I wanted to ask you, given the fact that all these stresses are going on, what kind of innovations have you guys been able to create? And how can you take advantage of the crisis, given the fact that all of these things are happening? And I know you may have commented about that earlier, but if you could go into that a little more, that would be great.
Well, yeah, it's like I said, it's a little counterintuitive, but we're actually using the crisis as an opportunity to strengthen our brand. And the way we're doing that is because of the staycation concept. A lot of people are staying home and they're investing in things like swimming pools and hot tubs and bikes and those types of things. So, the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. So with everybody focusing on that backyard, our industry is experiencing an uplift. Everybody is. With that, a lot of these plants have been closed due to the coronavirus. So the channels of distribution are sold out of everything. So there's a really strong demand for our products, and the people who can provide or supply the channel with products are coming out on top. And King's always had a very good on-time delivery in terms of fulfilling distribution and our big dealer directs. And but we are getting stretched out a little bit on some of our lead times. But I just had a call with one of our key representatives the other day, and he told us that we are far, said it 3 times, exceeding the rest of the industry in terms of our ability to fulfill. And that, in addition to some of the ways we manage the channel, has separated us from the rest of the pack. So when the channel, when things calm down and we resume whatever the new normal looks like, that entire dealer base is going to recognize King Technology as the organization that was able to support their product needs with innovative products that they can make their appropriate margins on. And we're seeing that in our sales today. There's a big demand for the product. So we're seeing it as a way to strengthen our brand.
Okay. Well, I want to move into the question and answer and get the participants involved. And we've got one question that I want to start with that came in, which is, how do the two of you manage your disagreements when you disagree on things? How do you manage that?
I'll go first. I have to say, I don't think that if we've had one disagreement, it would be one. We don't disagree. And here, I'll tell you how that comes about. One of my mentors had mentioned to me, the best way to come to a solution is for is for you to sometimes not just have a hard stand on your position. Hear what the other side is, and maybe sometimes you bend. Now, I don't want to make that sound like I'm the one that's always bending, because I don't think I am. I don't think Randy's always bending either. But we typically come to everything with best practice. And that's, I respect Randy and his views, and he respects mine. If there was ever a disagreement, it was probably because of a misunderstanding. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. I mean it. We really don't. Now, that's my opinion. And
so how frequently, well, I'll come back to this. I want to get Randy's response to this, and then I'll get back to my next question. Randy?
Yeah, a lot of it goes back to that transparency that we talked about earlier in the call. Joe and I, neither of us are so rigid in our ways that it's got to be our decision, our way. There's a lot of flexibility there on both our parts. And when we can have, we actually meet every week at least once a week for about 3 hours. And sometimes it's big picture stuff, sometimes it's detailed stuff. But we leverage each other's experiences and insights on these things, and it's a back and forth. And there's days when my suggestion goes, there's days when Joe's suggestions go. And I think it's because we communicate so well together, and we have that level of trust that before I came to King Technology, quite frankly, I'd never experienced. But most of my experiences, all of them previously, were larger corporations. So this is a unique opportunity, but it really comes down to, I trust Joe to take my opinion, and if he can help with it, he does. If we need to modify, we will, and that's worked well.
That was going to be my next question, which is I know you guys meet, I think, on Tuesdays, and you start around 11 o'clock and go to sometimes 3 or 4 in the afternoon, is what I've heard. Right. So the next question, again, we're looking for questions now for everybody. The next question that came in was, what did the 32 hours of interviews consist of?
Well, I'll kick it off. 14 years ago, so we'll see how the memory goes here. Everybody's got a different style. In my experience, what I was looking for was, and I basically was asking Randy questions about himself, his wife, and how they come together to make decisions about the family, whether it be good issues or tough issues. And that was my first question. And that really was the foundation for what was I looking for? What I was looking for is he going to make a decision on his own and he's not going to participate in gathering new information? His wife happens to be an important person. So that was a code for me that if he's willing to inquire from his wife, he's going to inquire from somebody else, whether it be me or other experts, as the topic would come up. Our kids are probably some of the most important, and we pour the most into them. Now, for me, as my wife is raising our kids, King Technology was my baby, and how I hired and how I communicated to our directors and several of the pillars that I hired. One of our people is with us 44 years. The rest are in the 30s and 20s, and it's been a long time. So again, I was looking for, trying to peel the onion back. How do you go about making decisions? How do you communicate that? And then also, is it changeable? Are you rigid or are you flexible? And Randy's like me, as more information comes up, we adjust. our first 3 weeks here on this COVID, we thought we were going to take a dive. Didn't know how deep, but it turned out it's on the rise. And that's that adjusting, reading the dashboard, reading your people, keeping the ear to the ground. There was a lot of things that I think we demonstrate in our families that I think are just code for how you're going to treat and deal with others. And it sounds crazy, but I think we spent a great deal of time of the 31 hours starting there, and then where does that go?
Yeah. And in addition to that, it wasn't just Joe vetting me, it was also me vetting Joe.
That's what I wanted to ask about what's your perspective, and what was the vetting process like from your perspective?
Well, it was, I was looking for a certain work environment, one that was in alignment with my values. And, when you go into someone's office, you look behind their wall and you can see where their value system lies in many cases. And I recognized that as soon as I stepped into his office. And so I was more comfortable than I anticipated being, because I previously worked for Siemens, the big German outfit, and coming to King Technology was quite a seismic change for me in terms of scale. So I wanted to be very careful about it. And so during that 31 hours, I thought it was very interesting that Joe wanted to know about my wife, our decision-making process, how do we go about raising our children, what was important to us. And I keep expecting him to wanting to go through my resume and my experiences at Siemens and how did you do this? And we really didn't even get to that. But through that process, I learned a lot about him as well. And so it was the same type of, we both achieved the same thing through those 31 hours. We even, I think it was twice, my wife came out with us and we had coffee and dinner. So we made sure that she was comfortable with this move. And one of the things I thought was very, and I remember to this day, was Joe saying, I might be the right guy for him, but he wanted to make sure that he was the right guy for me. And so it was a lot of just making sure that, and I think that's one of the reasons too, that we don't have a lot of, very little issue with our decision making. We took the time up front, just like with the family planning. Joe took the time up front, and so that preparation paid off, is paying off, and will pay off.
I'd just
Bob,
like to augment this. Yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
I met Joe and then Randy several years ago, and I remember them describing this process to me. But I also took out of it that they very much had shared values. And I think that having shared values was really vitally important to being able to make good decisions together. So I think there's a whole bunch of things that went into this. And spending that time proved to be a very good investment.
Those shared values became the blueprint for how we run the company. So there's really no gray in what we do. It actually simplifies things considerably. This is how we're going to do it because this is what's in alignment with our values.
The next question, I didn't have anything to do with this, but the next question is, it says, I missed the first few minutes, but how and why did they seek help from Tom and St. Thomas? What helped them realize that paying for consultation would be valuable? How did they hear about you, Tom? That's my marketing. That's from my marketing person. No, I'm teasing. That's not true. That's not true.
You can thank your wife when you get home. I'd love to answer that. I had an interesting story. Many of you may know this name. Patti Mcneely is a dear friend and has been for over 30 years. He's in my executive business group, one of about 8 or 10 people, has been for a long time. And as you all do, you turn to your confidants when you're going to be making some major decisions. And the funny thing is, now Tom doesn't remember our first coffee, but Patti kept leaning on me and saying, you got to meet this Tom Hubler. And I said, I don't see why I should, because I think I'm going to sell my business someday. And so why would I need to meet a family business counselor guy? And so we had coffee. He told me about his resume, and I told him, thanks, but no thanks. See you later. And this was about the early, before Great Recession. And then I started thinking, and Patti was leaning on me as in, Joe, you really want to think this through before you go and do this and sell your business. So now I'm going to shorten the story. I got enough counsel, enough advice, and my wife and I talked about it, and we realized, no, this isn't something. And it was really hard because Randy is a critical part to, and why I spent so much time making sure it was right is, boy, you sure don't want to get this wrong. If somebody's going to be the bridge and you want to hold your team together and you want to continue to grow, you got to get it right. There's really no room for plan B. So I really leaned on Tom when I made the decision that we were going to have this be not a legacy business, but it's a stewardship business. It's one that we want to teach our sons how to maneuver through with consistency so that they in turn can pass it on to their sons or daughter, and however the family expands. Because a company like this is such a joy because it teaches so much about the person. I'm so grateful to have Tom and Patti, Bob, and others that have counseled me how to do this well. And it was worth absolutely every bit of investment. And when I talk about investment, I don't mean just the economic side. There were tears. There were, I've got young daughter-in-laws coming into this. One, her father was top guy at Wells Fargo as an economist, only knows corporate America. And wow, talk about trying to get her to release when we were negotiating to have Carson come into the business. And no, we didn't have a resume. No, we don't know what you're going to get paid. We don't know what your benefits are, but we do want you to resign because by the time we need you to resign because we're going to hire you. And she's like, anyway, all this advice that we got, but a lot of investment, and there were a lot of tears because it was everybody learning what a family business looks like and how you have to trust each other. Key word is trust. There's the speed of trust. You develop trust, amazing how fast you can go.
But I think, if you would, Joe, if you could comment about the fact that not only have you and Randy made an investment, but the whole family has made an investment in family meetings, mm-hmm. and the whole family has made an investment at the University of St. Thomas. And I think that there's been some positive return that you all have gotten from those investments. And I was wondering if you could just comment about that.
Absolutely. The number of, I would say, 8 or 9 out of 10 seminars that we go to as a family at St. Thomas are A+. And they really resonate with us. And it might be, I think, all of us, actually. And it was interesting. It's a really important base because there's other family members. There are people that you can pick up the phone and talk to. You can help. I love helping other people, so I'm oftentimes doing that, but I'm also receiving back just as much. So St. Thomas has been a great place, and it's kind of hard to say because our sons both went to Bethel, and we are football family, and so we know what smash-based football looks like on Saturdays. And to go and be embraced by St. Thomas and vice versa, that was overcoming probably one of the biggest challenges in my life, for anybody that knows what I'm talking about. But I love St. Thomas. I love their program, and they're really outstanding professional. John's doing a fabulous job leading that group.
So what about the family meetings? Can you comment about that, Joe?
Yeah, we have 2 family meetings a year, and so we incorporated it with inviting Tom to continue with us so that we can stick handle this correctly. He can be our co-pilot, so to speak, wingman. And the way we do it is the person that's taking the notes at the meeting, and it will be anybody, it's just whoever chooses, and it's a spouse or one of our sons or my wife or myself. And so whoever takes the notes then becomes the agenda person for the following meeting. So it's every 6 months, and we will ask at the end of the meeting what input, what worked, what didn't, what should we have for the next meeting. And a lot of it has to do with just keeping them, this is very important, very important. It can't be just your sons or your daughters, whoever's in the business. They have the spouse has got to feel a part of this business. And the only way to do it is to speak a language at the level that they can understand and bring them into it. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, and I wouldn't even say we're close to it working well. It's working okay. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a process. And it's not easy, but they appreciate it. And I guess my encouragement would be is what you're doing is you're teaching a language that they may not know, family business. You're teaching, revenue. You're talking about direction. You're talking about big decisions, why we did what we did, what's coming up, buying a new building, another location. It just goes on, but it's vernacular, and then there's nuances. So it allows them to learn, even though they have no idea what you're talking about. But the next meeting they do, and then they start to get it. And I started teaching my sons at the dinner table. They had no idea what I was talking about, but they do now. And so we just had, as an example, we just invited Alex and Carson to start joining our board meetings, and they're hearing things at 1,000,000 feet. And they finally said, wow, we can see what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I don't understand this and I don't understand that, but I'm so excited to be learning. The same thing with the family business.
One of the things that's really a delicate issue in many family businesses is the issue of compensation. And the question that came in was, how was compensation for your sons determined, and were their expectations in line with the corporate policy relative to compensation? Randy, you want to comment about that, or maybe Joe, either one of you?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Randy, could I just say an opening statement? I don't know what our sons make right this minute. I couldn't tell you. They've never told me, and Randy's never told me. And I always told them that when you come into the business, whatever level that you've earned, that's where you're coming in. That's up to you. It has nothing to do with your last name. And then I turned the ball over, I handed the ball to Randy, and I said, bring them in. They're just like anybody else.
Randy, your comments?
Okay. So this goes back to the earlier comment. We treat them as though they're king employees, not kings. And we go out to market when we whenever we have a new requisition for an employee, we go to market, we see what the market is, and that's where we begin the negotiations. That's exactly what we did with both Carson and Alex. We went to market. We saw what market was paying, what the rate was for their level of experience, and that's what they were offered.
Okay. Another question came in, Joe. If you're willing to talk a little bit about the history of your relationship with your brother in the business and how that went, if you're willing to comment about that. And you don't have to if you're not comfortable doing that.
Somebody might know who I am. Quick story. It would take volumes, but my father and I started the business. We brought one of my brothers into the business. He was not a partner. My dad and I were partners, and then that was all working well until my dad decided to retire at 70, and we had two divisions. One was swimming pool and hot tub. That's one division, and the other was irrigation, underground sprinkler, electrical. And they weren't a lot. There wasn't a lot of product. It was just two distinct markets that we went after. And one of my brothers that was an employee said, "I got a great idea." And this was right at the point my dad was saying, "I think I'm going to retire." And I said, "I've got some ideas over here in the pool and spa. I'm going to go this way." A third brother came along and said, "I've got money. I want in." And that got my dad's attention. And that was the worst thing that could have happened, because those two guys became brothers. Ha! It actually split their brotherhood. They became partners, and it lasted for about 18 months. They moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where their wives were from. And one brother, the one with the money, had the most stock. He fired the younger brother, the one that's in between us. And he was the idea guy. And so my oldest brother ran with it, made tens of millions of dollars, and while the other one went into bankruptcy, the one that came up with the ideas. Now, it actually is a great question, and nobody asked. I don't know if the question was asked for this reason, but here's the nugget that dropped out. My sons watched this whole thing, and I'll tell you what, nothing will come between those two guys. They're like this, because they saw what happened to my two brothers, of which we're all estranged from the oldest one that was the capitalist, that narcissistic. It's the worst thing that could happen. And he ruined the whole family over the love for money. And anyway, that's what happened. And I'm so grateful I went this way, and we've not been harmed. We've done nothing but succeed.
Thanks for sharing that, Joe. Are there any other questions coming in? Bob, do you have any questions?
No, I'm glad that Joe emphasized how important it is to have the spouses involved when you bring in the next generation, but also including Mary, Joe's wife. That the emotional balance in the family is affected by all of those parties. And it's so important to keep everybody sort of on a level playing field for that. I do want to perhaps ask about, but also stress, that I think that the family meetings are just family, and then there are board meetings that are company related, and that's different. And Joe and Randy, I guess I'd ask each of you to talk about what kinds of things you address in the family meetings versus what kinds of things you address in those company related meetings.
Well, I guess I'll answer that. What happens in the family meetings, because Randy's not present. Ours are very, it's an hour and a half. We really try to stick to it. It's really more about updating each of the family members about where each person's at in their life, in their career. One spouse is just a mom and is at home, and you know, she's doing a fantastic job. She's got 3 kids, and she'll tell her story. And the other spouse is at Target and doing a great job balancing a career and 2 children. And then my wife will share what is important about what's going on in each of our lives on the so-called purpose side of life. And that's what we're sharing is the purpose side. The last meeting, I didn't even get a chance to really share what I was so excited about, the progress that we made as a company. I was last. We didn't even share, you know, the revenue and new things that were going on and expectations. So it's really about trying to make sure that we're understanding each one's purpose in life, and then questions and answers are about, you know, maybe some things that are going on in the business. But right now it's really, if I could say this, a family business meeting is really about learning how to meet. That's it. And you do that because in good times, you get this all figured out, and then you can, you know, Tom helped us. How do we talk about good things? How do we talk about uncomfortable things? And how do we talk about some really tough things? And he did a great job of teaching us that, and we have a toolbox and what we use those, and we practice those. You know, most of it was made up, but someday we're going to need it because somebody's going to say, why the heck did this happen, and how come my son didn't get the opportunity, or Alex didn't get this, and Carson didn't? I don't know what's going to happen. But we're also trying to teach, this is really important, we're trying to teach the spouses that they should not be the source of undermining the relationships of the brothers. It's really important. They have a critical role. And the last thing I would say, that sounds maybe kind of tough, but you don't want that to happen because that's poison. What you do want to have happen, and this is what I've been teaching them. The last year has been the term stewardship. And what I'm teaching them, all of them, is that they're not owners, because in the definition of this world that we live in, ownership really is bank accounts, buildings, cars, and stuff. Like, I'm 30 years old and I'm an owner of this big thing, and look at all the money and things that I'm going to have access to. Wrong. You're a steward. You're coming into this with the opportunity that when you take over the reins and you can control things, you can have an impact on the future, the lives of our employees, our vendors, our customers, everybody. You can enrich their lives by driving this ship well, like Randy's been doing and the executive team, and that's stewardship. It's not bank accounts. So a family business meeting has a whole different objective, in my opinion, than a board meeting, and I'll let Randy speak to that.
Yeah, so our board meetings are fairly typical in the topics that we cover. We begin with a macro view of what's going on with the organization, opportunities, challenges. Then we'll move into departmental updates. What are the highlights, the headwinds and tailwinds that we're experiencing in each department? And then we typically have a primary topic, which could be budgeting, which could be strategic planning, those types of things. And then we'll have the second half of the meeting, which is a very in-depth financial review. Now we just started this, so the last board meeting we had, Carson and Alex joined us as observers, and going forward, they will join us as observers. And one of the things we did do prior to this last meeting, when they were actually in the room, was we did a status update on their onboarding process and how each of them were doing. So we would review that during those meetings as well.
Thank you. We're just about at the point where we have to close, but there's one thing I wanted to ask Joe, if he'd be willing to make a brief comment on. And it has to do with something they don't know about you, Joe, that I think is important to share. And it has to do with the King's Men for the Kingdom. And if you'd be willing to comment about that.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. I hired a friend who hired a man who became a very dear friend, and he's a mentor to me today. And that I hired him first because he was a life coach, and I told him that I wanted to onboard our sons. Now, this was before I onboarded them officially through Tom's experience. But what that was, and what it allowed to have happen, is that Jim's experience running and being involved in a larger company, et cetera, he said, what we really want to find out from your sons first is about their character. And so we started meeting monthly, and as the company was going through developing its core values and penning it, and we were coming up with our vision statement, penning that, we had each one of the two sons. Keep in mind, they're not even close to coming into the business. This is 5+ years ago. He said, we want to find out their kind of character and how they think and prepare their minds. And he used the term character before cash. Now, as this is all evolving, he says, I got to give Jim the credit. He called it. He said, as we're going through this, we've been in it for, I don't know, maybe 18 months. He said, you know what you guys are? You guys, when you look at your core values, Joe, we had the sons put their own together, and then we asked them to merge their two sets to their one set and to negotiate their core values. There's a consistency here, and the purpose in their life is the same as yours. It's the King's Men for the Kingdom. So we're God-following men that want to have an impact in other people's lives by living a solid morals and ethics. And so that's how that all came together. And now that's what we came together as a unit for that as being our purpose. And then I had an idea, and I'm not wearing my ring today, but I had a ring that was very important to me by my uncle, who was a dear, solid Christian man, very well known in the Twin Cities at the time, great giver back in charitable work, etc. He had a ring, and I got a ring that was similar to it. And I said, you know what? We're going to be the King's Men for the Kingdom. And I took each one of them with their spouses individually to a jewelry store, and I got the similar design, and they each have one now. And that is a symbol of our being together. That's what that means. So when we get together as a family, we all wear them, and it's pretty cool.
I want to thank you, Joe, for sharing, and Randy for sharing. This has been absolutely terrific today. And I also want to thank all the participants who also were able to be here today to share with us the wonderful stories for the King family and King Technology. And I want to thank you for joining the webinar, and we'll be sending you a follow-up email to the attendees that will include a recording of the discussion. And so we'll keep you informed about plans for the future as they develop, because we anticipate we're either going to have in-person meetings like we've had historically, or we'll continue to do these webinars. So thank you again, and blessings to you all.